Section 14 of the Endeavour Journal of Sir Joseph Banks. Journal from 25 August 1768 to 12 July 1771 by Joseph Banks. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Gail Timmerman Vaughan. Section 14. June 1769, Part 1. 1769, June 1. The boat could not be got ready till after dinner, when we set out. We rowed most of the night, and came to a grappling just under the land of Imau. 1769, June 2. Soon after daybreak we saw an Indian canoe, and upon hailing her she showed us an inlet through the reef, into which we pulled, and soon fixed upon a coral rock, about 150 yards from the shore, as a very proper situation for our observatory. It was about 80 yards long and 60 broad, and had in the middle of it a bed of white sand, large enough for our tents to stand upon. The second lieutenant and people therefore immediately set about it, while I went upon the main island to trade with the inhabitants for provisions, of which I soon bought a sufficient supply. Before night our observatory was in order, telescopes all set up and tried, etc., and we went to rest, anxious for the events of tomorrow. The evening having been very fine, gave us, however, great hopes of success. 1769, June 3. Various were the changes observed in the weather during the course of last night. Some one or other of us was up every half hour, who constantly informed the rest that it was either clear or hazy. At daybreak we rose, and soon after had the satisfaction of seeing the sun rise as clear and bright as we could wish him. I then wished success to the observers, Messrs. Gore and Monkhouse, and repaired to the island, where I could do the double service of examining the natural produce and buying provisions for my companions who were engaged in so useful a work. About 8, a large quantity of provisions were procured, when I saw 2 boats coming towards the place where I traded. These I was told belonged to Taurua, the king of the island, who was coming to pay me a visit. As soon as the boats came near the shore, the people formed a lane. He landed, bringing with him his sister, Nuna, and both came towards the tree under which I stood. I went out and met them, and brought them very formally into a circle I had made, into which I had before suffered none of the natives to come. Standing is not the fashion among these people. I must provide them a seat, which I did by unwrapping a turban of Indian cloth, which I wore instead of a hat, and spreading it upon the ground, upon which we all sat down, and the king's present was brought, consisting of a hog, a dog, a quantity of breadfruit, coconuts, etc. I immediately sent a canoe to the observatory to fetch my present, an adze, a shirt, and some beads, with which His Majesty seemed well satisfied. Tuburai and Tamayo, who came with us now, came from the observatory. She said that she was related to Taurua, and brought him a present, a long nail and a shirt, which she gave to Nuna. After the first internal contact was over, I went to my companions at the observatory, carrying with me Taurua, Nuna, and some of their chief attendants. To them we showed the planet upon the sun, and made them understand that we came on purpose to see it. After this, they went back, and myself with them. I spent the rest of the day in examining the produce, etc., of the island, and found it very nearly similar to that of Tahiti. The people exactly the same. Indeed, we saw many of the identical same people as we had often seen at Tahiti, and every one knew very well every kind of trade we had and the value it bore in that island. The hills in general came nearer to the water, and flats were considerably less, and less fertile, than at Tahiti. The low point near which we lay was composed entirely of sand and coral. Here neither breadfruit nor any useful vegetables would grow. It was covered over with Pandanus tectorius, and with these grew several plants we had not seen at Tahiti, among them iberis, which Mr. Gore tells me is the plant called by the voyagers scurvy grass, which grows plentifully upon all the low islands. At sunset I came off, having purchased another hog from the king. Soon after my arrival at the tent, 3 handsome girls came off in a canoe to see us. They had been at the tent in the morning with Taurua. They chatted with us very freely, and with very little persuasion agreed to send away their carriage and sleep in the tent, a proof of confidence which I have not before met with upon so short an acquaintance. 1769, June 4. We prepared ourselves to depart, in spite of the entreaties of our fair companions, who persuaded us much to stay. What with presents and trade, our stock of provisions was so large that we were obliged to give away a large quantity. This done, we put off, and before night arrived at the tents, where we had the great satisfaction that the observation there had been attended with as much success as Mr. Green and the captain could wish, the day having been perfectly clear, not so much as a cloud intervening. We also heard the melancholy news that a large part of our stock of nails had been purloined by some of the ship's company during the time of the observation, when everybody was ashore who had any degree of command. One of the thieves was detected, but only 7 nails were found upon him out of 100 weight, and he bore his punishment without impeaching any of his accomplices. This loss is of a very serious nature, as these nails, if circulated by the people among the Indians, will much lessen the value of iron, our staple commodity. 1769 June 5. During our absence at Imau, an old woman of some consequence, a relation of Tamio, was dead, and was placed not far from the fort, to rot above ground, as is the custom of the island. I went this morning to see her. A small square was neatly railed in with bamboo, and in the midst of it a canoe awning set up upon 2 posts. In this the body was laid, covered with fine cloth. Near this was laid fish, etc., meat for the gods, not for the deceased, but to satisfy the hunger of the deities, lest they should eat the body, which Tuburai told us they would certainly do if this ceremony was neglected. In front of the square was a kind of stile, or place lower than the rest, where the relations of the deceased stood when they cried or bled themselves, and under the awning were numberless rags containing the blood and tears they had shed. Within a few yards were 2 occasional houses. In one of them some of the relations constantly remained, generally a good many. In the other the chief male mourner resided, and kept a very remarkable dress, in which he performed a ceremony, both which I shall describe when I have an opportunity of seeing it in perfection, which Tuburai promises me I shall soon have. This day we kept the king's birthday, which had been delayed on account of the absence of the 2 observing parties. Several of the Indians dined with us and drank his Majesty's health, by the name of Kihi Arko, for we could not teach them to pronounce a word more like King George. Tupaia, however, to show his loyalty, got most enormously drunk. 1769 June 6. In walking into the woods yesterday, I saw in the hands of an Indian an iron tool, made in the shape of the Indian adzes. Very different, I was sure, from anything that had been carried out or made, either by the Dolphin or this ship. This excited my curiosity, much the more so when I was told that it did not come out of either of those ships, but from 2 others which came here together. This was a discovery not to be neglected. With much difficulty and labour, I at last got the following account of them, viz., that in their month of Pepere, which answers to our January, 1768, 2 Spanish ships came here, commanded by a man whom they called To Otera, that they lay 8 days in a bay called Hidia, some leagues to the eastward of Batavia, where the ship now lies. That during their stay they sent tents ashore, and some slept in them. That they were chiefly connected with a chief, whose name was Orete, whose younger brother they carried away with them, promising to return in 9 months. That they had on board their ships a woman, and that on their departure they stood to the westward as long as they were seen from the island. I was very particular in these inquiries, as the knowledge got by them may be of some consequence. The methods I took to gain this account would be much too tedious to mention. One of my greatest difficulties was to determine of what nation they were, which was done thus. I pointed to our colours and asked whether the ships had such or not. No, was the answer, when the question was thoroughly understood. I opened a large sheet of flags, and asked which of them they had. Tuburai looked steadfastly over them, and at last pitched upon the Spanish ensign, and to that he adhered, though we tried him over and over. 1769 June 7. We were this morn visited by several of Dutaha's relations, women especially, probably to sound us upon the score of our usage at Atahoro. We had resolved at that place rather to put up with our losses than to mattow or frighten the Indians, the consequence of which we knew to be scarcity of provisions. We therefore treated these people very well, making them presents to tempt them to come again and bring Dutaha, king of the hogs as we called him, and certainly have always found him. 1769 June 8. Fresh proofs of the Spanish ships every day in things of theirs which have been left here. Among the rest a coarse shirt and a woolen jacket, both of manufacture different from any English. 1769 June 9. Yesterday and today the Heiva no Medua or funeral ceremony walked. My curiosity was raised by his most singular dress. I was desirous of knowing what he did during his walk. I asked Tuburai, at the same time desired leave to attend him tomorrow, upon which my consenting to perform a character was readily granted. Tomorrow, therefore, I am to be smutted from head to foot, and to do whatever they desire me to do. Breadfruit has for some time been scarce with us. About 10 days ago the trees were thinned all at once, from there being a great show of fruit. Everyone was employed in making mahi for about a week. Where the breadfruit we now have comes from, we cannot tell, but we have more than the woods in our neighbourhood can supply us with. Probably our consumption has thinned the trees in this neighbourhood, as the dolphins, who came here about this time, saw great plenty all the time they stayed. If this is the case, what we now get may be brought from some neighbouring place, where the trees are not yet exhausted. 1769, June 10. This evening, according to my yesterday's engagement, I went to the place where the Medua lay, where I found Tuburai, Tamio, Huna, the Medua's daughter, and a young Indian prepared to receive me. Tuburai was the Heiva. The 3 others and myself were to Nineveh. He put on his dress, most fantastical, though not unbecoming. The figure annexed will explain it far better than words can. I was next prepared by stripping off my European cloths and putting me on a small strip of cloth round my waist, the only garment I was allowed to have. But I had no pretensions to be ashamed of my nakedness, for neither of the women were a bit more covered than myself. They then began to smut me and themselves with charcoal and water. The Indian boy was completely black, the women and myself as low as our shoulders. We then set out. Tuburai began by praying twice, one near the corpse, again near his own house. We then proceeded toward the fort. It was necessary, it seems, that the procession should visit that place, but they dare not do it without the sanction of some of us. Indeed, it was not till many assurances of our consent that they ventured to perform any part of their ceremonies. To the fort, then, we went, to the surprise of our friends and affright of the Indians who were there, for they everywhere fly before the Heiva, like sheep before a wolf. We soon left it and proceeded along the shore towards a place where above 100 Indians were collected together. We, the Ninevehs, had orders from the Heiva to disperse them. We ran towards them, but before we came within 100 yards of them, they dispersed every way, running to the first shelter, hiding themselves under grass or whatever else would conceal them. We now crossed the river into the woods and passed several houses. All were deserted. Not another Indian did we see for about half an hour that we spent in walking about. We, the Ninevehs, then came to the Heiva and said, "Imatata," there are no people, after which we repaired home. The Heiva undressed, and we went into the river and scrubbed one another till it was dark before the blackening would come off. 1769, June 11. This evening Tuburai came to the tents, bringing a bow and arrows, in consequence of a challenge Mr. Gore had given him some time ago to shoot. This challenge was, however, misunderstood. Tuburai meant to try who could shoot the farthest, Mr. Gore to shoot at a mark, and neither was at all practised in what the other valued himself upon. Tuburai, to please us, shot in his way. He knelt down and drew the bow, and as soon as he let slip the string dropped the bow from his hand. The arrow, however, went 274 yards. 1769, June 12. In my morning's walk today, I met a company of travelling musicians. They told me where they should be at night, so after supper we all repaired to the place. There was a large concourse of people round this band, which consisted of 2 flutes and 3 drums, the drummers accompanying their music with their voices. They sung many songs generally in praise of us, for these gentlemen, like Homer of old, must be poets as well as musicians. The Indians, seeing us entertained with their music, asked us to sing them an English song, which we most readily agreed to, and received much applause, so much so that one of the musicians became desirous of going to England to learn to sing. These people, by what we can learn, go about from house to house, the master of the house and the audience paying them for their music in cloth, meat, beads, or anything else which the one wants and the other can spare. 1769, June 13. Mr. Monkhouse, our surgeon, met today with an insult from an Indian, the first that has been met with by any of us. He was pulling a flower from a tree which grew on a burying ground, and consequently was, I suppose, sacred, when an Indian came behind him and struck him. He seized hold of him and attempted to beat him, but was prevented by 2 more, who coming up seized hold of his hair and rescued their companion, after which they all ran away. 1769 June 14. I lay in the woods last night, as I very often did. At daybreak I was called up by Mr. Gore, and went with him shooting, from which party we did not return till night, when we saw a large number of canoes in the river behind the tents, of which we have this account. Last night an Indian was clever enough to steal a coal rake out of the fort without being perceived. In the morning it was missing, and Captain Cook, being resolved to recover it, as also to discourage such attempts for the future, went out with a party of men and seized 25 of their large sailing canoes, which were just come in from Tithuroa, a neighbouring island, with a supply of fish for the inhabitants of this. The coal rake was upon this soon brought back, but Captain Cook thought he now had in his hands an opportunity of recovering all the things which had been stolen. He therefore proclaimed to everyone that till all the things which had been stolen from us were brought back, the boats should not stir. A list of these was immediately drawn up and read several times to the Indians, who readily promised that everything should be brought back. Great application was made to me in my return that some of these might be released. I did not, till I got to the fort, understand the reason of their being detained, and when I did, nothing appeared so plain as that no one of them should on any account be let go from favour, but the whole kept till the things were returned, if ever they were, which I much doubted, as the canoes pretty certainly did not belong to the people who had stolen the things. I confess, had I taken a step so violent, I would have seized either the persons of the people who had stolen from us, most of whom we either knew or shrewdly suspected, or their goods at least, instead of those of people who are entirely unconcerned in the affair, and have not probably interest enough with their superiors, to whom all valuable things are carried, to procure the restoration demanded. 1769 June 15. Some few presents today, but no trade at all. We found ourselves today involved in an unexpected difficulty with regard to the boats. They were loaded with provisions which their owners must live upon or starve, in consequence of which they asked leave to go and take them out, and are allowed to do so as much as they can eat. We are not able, however, to distinguish the true owners, so many avail themselves of this indulgence by stealing their neighbours, which we cannot prevent. Indeed, in a few days more, the whole consisting chiefly of fish, cured to keep about that time, will be spoiled. 1769 June 16. Some presents today, but no trade. Several petitions for canoes backed by our principal friends, but none complied with. In the afternoon the body of the old woman, which lay near us, was removed, but to what place or on what account we could not learn. 1769 June 17. This morn Mr. Gore and myself went to Opare to shoot ducks, little thinking what the consequence of our expedition would be, for, before we had half filled our bags, we had frightened away Taha and all his household and furniture, a matter of no small diversion to us, to find his Majesty so much more fearful than his ducks. 1769 June 18. This morn the boat was sent to get ballast for the ship. The officer sent in her, not finding stones convenient, began to pull down a burying ground. To this the Indians objected much, and a messenger came to the tents, saying that they would not suffer it. I went with the second lieutenant to the place. They had desired them to desist from destroying the burying ground they had begun upon, but showed them another. The officer, however, thought it best not to molest anything of the kind, and sent the people to the river, where they gathered stones very easily, without any possibility of offending anybody. 1769 June 19. The fish in the canoes stink most immoderately, so as in some winds to render our situation in the tents rather disagreeable. This evening Oberea, Othiothea, and Tuarua came to visit us for the first time since the affair of the jacket. They were very desirous of sleeping in the fort, but my marquee was full of Indians, and no one else chose to entertain them, so they were obliged to repair to their canoes to sleep, rather out of humour. 1769 June 20. This morn early Oberea and company came to the tents, bringing a large quantity of provisions as a present. Among the rest, a very fat dog. We had lately learned that these animals were eaten by the Indians and esteemed more delicate food than pork. Now therefore was our opportunity of trying the experiment. He was given immediately over to Tupaya, who, finding that it was a food that we were not accustomed to, undertook to stand butcher and cook both. He killed him by stopping his breath, holding his hands fast over his mouth and nose, an operation which took above a quarter of an hour. He then proceeded to dress him much in the same manner as we would do a pig, singeing him over the fire, which was lighted to roast him, and scraping him clean with a shell. He then opened him with the same instrument, and taking out his entrails, pluck, etc., sent him to the sea, where they were most carefully washed, then put into cocoa-nut shells with what blood he had found in them. The stones were now laid, and the dog well covered with leaves laid upon them. In about 2 hours he was dressed, and in another quarter of an hour completely eat. A most excellent dish he made for us, who were not much prejudiced against any species of food. I cannot, however, promise that an European dog would eat as well, as these scarce in their lives touch animal food, cocoa-nut kernel, breadfruit, yams, etc., being what their masters can best afford to give them, and what indeed from custom, I suppose, they prefer to any kind of food. 1769, June 21. This morning came Oamo, a chief we had not seen before. With him came a boy and a young woman, to whom all the people present showed a most uncommon respect, everyone taking their garments from their shoulders and wrapping them round their breasts. We were, upon this, very desirous of showing them all the respect we could, as well as learning who they were. We could not, however, prevail upon the woman to come into the tents, though she seemed very desirous of it. The people all joined in preventing her by their advice at sometimes, almost using force. The boy was in the same manner kept without. Dr. Solander met him by accident, close by the gate, and laying hold of his hand, he followed him in, before the people were aware. Those in the tents, however, very soon sent him out again. Upon inquiry, we find that this boy is the son of Oamo and Oborea, who are husband and wife, but have long ago been parted by mutual consent, which gives both leave to enjoy the pleasures of this life, without control from their former engagements. The girl, about 16, is intended for his wife, but he being not more than 8 years old, they have not cohabited together. 1769, June 22. Our visitors returned early this morn. Oborea, Otheothea, Oamo, etc. The latter begins to show himself a very sensible man by the shrewd questions he asks about England, its manners and customs, etc. Much interest is made to procure the release of the boats. Indeed, Captain Cook is now tired of keeping them, as he finds that not the least motion is made towards returning any of the stolen goods. 4 of them are therefore set at liberty. 1769, June 23. Our friends with us as usual. One of our seamen, a Portuguese, was last night missing. As there was no news of him this morning, we concluded that he was run away and meant to stay among the Indians. Captain Cook therefore offered a hatchet to any man who would bring him back. One soon offered and returned with him at night. He said that 2 Indians seized him and, stopping his mouth, forced him away. But as he was out of the fort after a woman, this account appeared improbable. The man was, however, not punished. 1769, June 24. Our friends all went to the westward last night. Nothing material happened during our solitude. The market has been totally stopped ever since the boats were seized, nothing being offered to sale but a few apples. Our friends, however, are liberal in presents, so that we make a shift to live without expending our bread, which, and spirits, are the most valuable articles to us. Late in the evening, Tuburai and Tamio returned from Ipare, bringing with them several presents. Among the rest, a large piece of thick cloth, which they desired that I should carry home to my sister, Opia, and for which they would take no kind of return. They are often very inquisitive about our families, and remember anything that is told to them very well. 1769, June 25. Prayers today, it being Sunday. Soon after, Potatau and Polotheara came to see us. 1769, June 26. At 3 o'clock this morn, Captain Cook and myself set out to the eastward in the pinnace, intending, if it was convenient, to go round the island, the weather calm and pleasant. We rowed till 8, and then went ashore in a district called Ohiana, governed by a chief called Ahio, who favoured us with his company to breakfast. Here we saw our old acquaintances, Tituboalo, Huna, who carried me immediately to their house, near which was placed the body of the old woman, which was removed from Batavia on the 16th. End of section 14. Part 1 of June 1769.